What is up, all you wonderful cruisers? So today, we're going to talk about how to get to the port. Should you drive? Should you fly? There's a lot of variables in which decision you make. Stick around. We're going to talk about this. Hey everybody, welcome to Cruising with Charles. So today's 2-Minute Tuesday. We're going to be talking about how we're going to get to the port. Whether we drive or fly, there's a lot of things that come into making that decision. So before we get into it, let's put the timer up here. We're going to try to keep this under 2 minutes. I seriously doubt I can, but we're going to try anyway. Okay, so getting to the port. In the past, I've driven, I have flown. It just depends on how far the port is and if I feel like driving. I have driven to Galveston, Texas from Arizona. I have driven to Florida from northern Indiana. I've also flown from Las Vegas to Long Beach, which is only a 37-minute flight. So there's a lot of variables that make this decision. But I'm going to give you 3 tips for each that you really need to consider. So first, let's talk about flying. Of course, it comes across as the quickest and easiest way to get to the cruise port, but it can also be very expensive. So tip number 1 when it comes to flying is going to be to book in advance. Watch the airlines for deals. I just recently got some Southwest flights for about $44 to Long Beach versus $200 to $300 on some of the other airlines. Tip number 2 when flying, leave early for the airport. Now, the reason I say leave early, and of course, this will be a big variable depending where you live. If you're only a few minutes from the airport, it's probably not a big deal. For me, I have an hour and a half drive to the airport in Las Vegas, and it's not uncommon for this road to have an accident. Now, when they have an accident on this road, that road can be blocked up for hours. I do have an alternative route that I can take, but I have to make sure I leave in enough time that if I have to bail and take the other route, that I know I have plenty of time to get to the airport. And the third tip for flying that you really need to consider is how far are you flying, and do you need to fly in a day before? Now, I don't really worry about it when I fly to Long Beach. There are several flights throughout the day that will get me to the port in time if something happens to my original flight. But what if I was flying to Miami to catch a flight and the flight I'm on's going to be there and get me there a couple hours before the ship's due to leave, and I get bumped for some reason or some delay keeps me from getting to the port in time? I'll miss the cruise. So there's a lot of things you got to weigh out. I would always encourage you to fly in the day before and get a hotel. It just depends, and that's a decision you have to make. Now let's talk about driving. If you don't live very far from the port, I know a lot of people that sail out of Florida, they live within an hour's drive. A lot of people in Long Beach live within an hour's drive of the cruise port. It's easy for them. So for me to drive to Long Beach, that's 5.5-hour drive. So let me give you 3 tips that I would just highly recommend you consider for driving. Tip number 1, leave early. Again, things happen. If you look at your GPS, that GPS isn't going to include time it takes if you have to stop and refuel, if you want to stop and get something to eat. That's the time it's going to take just to drive given traffic that's currently on the road. And traffic does change. Make sure you leave early. Give yourself a little bit of breathing room so if you do hit traffic, you're not going to miss the cruise. Or if you do decide to stop and eat, again, you've got plenty of wiggle room to make it to that port. If you can, and it's financially feasible, leave the day before. There's been many times I have left here, even though it's only a 5.5 hour drive, and I've driven 3 hours into Victorville and spent the night in Victorville, and then I only have about a 2 hour drive down the hill into Long Beach. I kind of break up the trip. I've even driven as far as Long Beach and stayed right there in Long Beach the night before. It all depends on how far you're driving and if you want to be worn out when you get to the cruise port or not. I've done that one too. I have left here at 3 in the morning, driven straight to the cruise ship, gotten on board, and stayed up that whole first night till about 11 or 12, and then just passed out. Tip number 3, watch prices, gas and parking fees. A lot of people don't consider that when they do drive. This current cruise I have coming up, I was originally going to drive. Some things changed. I started looking at the price of parking, the price of gas. It was actually cheaper for me to fly than it was to drive out to California. So those are the things you've got to consider. Let me know in the comments. Do you drive? Do you fly? Do you have one you prefer over the other? Really curious. I'll do both. Like I said, even if it's a cruise out of Florida, I may drive from Arizona straight out to Florida just to go on a cruise. I have done it before. But let us know in the comments what you do or what you prefer to do. And if you're new here, make sure you hit that like. Make sure you hit that subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell notification so you get updates when we put out more videos. And you can also follow us on social media. All the links are down in the description. And until next time, I am out of here.
About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions.